Hello and welcome to a new series that I'm doing where I'm going to be showing you how did I do it, just like the title says. And in this episode I'm going to be showing you how I made the mountains and the lake and all of the cliff faces around the northern area in Stardew Valley. If you haven't seen the series where I built Stardew Valley in Minecraft in survival just yet, then please go ahead and check out the playlist on my channel, or check the link in the video description. In the first episode I created the beach, and in the episodes after that I started working on the town, and then in the very last episode I created the mountains and the lake area to the north. So if you haven't seen that, please go and check it out. Now let's get started on how we built the mountains. Where do we start? Well, we'll start today with some of the pre-planning and progress already being done, because I did this at the very early stage, before I even made the first episode. You can see that right here. This is what it looked like at the very beginning when I was planning it out in creative, to get an idea of all the scale of everything. But now, after I've been building the town up and up, I've been moving stuff further and further away, and so now I'm gonna go ahead and make this scale more realistic. And now we're gonna go into some of the details, like how big is the lake going to be, how big are the bridges going to be, where does the mountain actually start, where are the pathways. All of these things are what we're going to be going through today, and I'm going to take you through it step by step. First off, let's have a look at all of the different features around the lake and around the mountain area. To the left here we have the Carpenter Robin. Then north of it we have some pathways and some cliff faces, and also the entranceway towards the backwoods and the railways to the north. Then if we follow the pathways to the east, we come around to Linus's tent. To the south, of course, we have the entrance coming from the community center. If we follow either pathways to the east, we'll arrive at the lake. Now this will be the main feature, and this is something that's going to define this area quite a bit. And very close to this lake we have two interesting features. Right here we have the mines, and then further to the east we have the Adventurers Guild. And eventually on the east we'll have a bridge that leads to the quarry. Now, something that we did see on the map earlier is that there is some big mountains right here. And so later on, we're gonna have to design a few mountains to poke out into the sky, maybe with some snowy tops and all of that. But first I want to focus on the area of the lake. So let's get a shape. And in order to get the right shape, we're going to focus on a couple of the features. Of course, the outer edge, we want to have an opening on the right. We want to have an opening next to the mine so that it connects to the mountain there. And then we want to define two islands in the middle. As you can see, we planned out two small islands, but they don't really match the size of the islands or the shape very well. They also don't really match the locations. So we're going to have to change a few things, and one of the things that I'm going to be using is a mod called Axiom. And Axiom is a very extensive mod that allows for the shaping of terrain. And one of the things that you can do with Axiom is you can just make rocks. Like over here, I can just make a large rock. Before we do anything, let's try and get a bit of a clean slate here. So first we'll just paint over everything with stone. I am doing this so that once we are making the shapes and changing the shape of everything, then we don't have like a mix of materials going around. So next up, I think what would be good is to remove these shapes here. Then we can smooth it out a little bit. Right now we look at what the shape of the lake will actually be. So previously I already did a little bit of shaping here by hand. So this I think would be a good spot where I would want the wooden plank to go. So that means that over here roughly will be an island. So we do have to make that island. I'll be using the rock tool for this. I'll start out with a radius of 3 and a noise radius of about 5. Now how big is that island going to be? I am not sure. But what I can immediately tell already is that it needs a little bit more shape. We could even make this slightly smaller. And then on the right of that island we have another bridge and another small island on the side. Now that we have a rough shape of the size of the islands and the shape, later I can go in by hand and make the shape perfectly what I want it to be. Now of course over here we're currently missing a little bit, right? We need this to come out. I'm going to create the contouring edge of the lake. It needs to come out, right? We have this path here and there needs to be a big a bit of a sharp turn here. Right, and then we go in a little bit more. And then we have sort of the rest. And then it will meet up somewhere above. We're not going to go too straight with those lines. And then eventually we meet up at the top here, I think. Let's see about that shape and that size, right? Now I know it's currently all this the same color. That doesn't help, so let's go ahead and change that to make it stand out a little bit. Now, is that the kind of shape that we would want? Maybe. Yeah, that feels about right. There does need to be a little bit more of a corner here, doesn't it? It needs to be roughly at this height. Roughly something like this. A little bit more pronounced. Then we of course have a bit more of a straight wall after that. And then we have a corner. It is relatively close to this island. Now I do feel that this island on the right might be a little bit too big, right? And it's a bit, I don't know, a bit far to the right as well. But yeah, we're gonna shape all of that. It is at the perfect height at least. So yeah, let's see if we can change the shape of this island a bit so that it feels like it matches with the scale of everything. Yeah, I think that'll do. Let's fill up the island as well, and then I'll turn it into some, I don't know, grass. For now, of course, I'm going to keep the details very low, but I just want to have this surface done. Then for the next one, we are going to start it around here, I think. This is going to be a big bridge. Oh, it's also a bit lower. Hang on. So this is roughly the same length, slightly bigger, I feel like. Alright, well, there we go. We have a bit of a shape. Does that feel natural for both of them? This one could use maybe a little bit more. And then if we move that one slightly to the left, then we are in the perfect spots here. I've gone ahead and filled up the remaining holes with some grass. Now we can extend this to the bottom a little bit, which we actually have a tool for, the stack. Now, of course, the lake won't be made out of stone. Don't mistake me here, we're in the mountains, but the lake is going to be made of a lot of blocks that we also use in the river, which is a combination of spruce, mud, and at the bottom there's going to be some brown wool. Alright, now let's think of the shape on the left side. I feel like most of that is correct. The only thing that's not entirely correct, maybe, is that this might need a little bit more space, actually. This might need a few extra blocks shaved off. How does that feel? A little bit better, right? This might also need to be a bit more... Yeah, I think that works a bit better. Now, of course, the shape doesn't fully match up because we're doing it a little bit differently, right? The Stardew Lake is going to be a bit bigger than this one probably, but this is what we're going to be working with. All right, well, there we have it. That's kind of the shape of the lake, right? That matches. The island does feel a little bit big, right? That bridge is a lot longer than we currently have it shown as, so I think we're gonna trim this down a little bit. We are gonna keep roughly the same shape for it, but definitely not as big. How about that? Is that a little better? Doesn't feel as thin on the left side now. Okay, I think that is actually looking almost perfect. Yeah. The only thing that I want to change is a small difference here. And that. Yeah, and maybe one more actually. I'm gonna move them one more. There we go. Yeah, that's looking good. Now we just need to move the whole thing. Because I do feel it's a bit too far to the north, right? It doesn't quite match up with this one here. And it needs to match up somewhat in the middle there. Does it match up? How about that? Is that good? That might be pretty good. We have a pretty big bridge there, so I think this one needs to move a little bit as well. Just a couple of blocks, right? All right, now we would need some support underneath this. So let's quickly fill all of that up. Now comes the next step, and we need to make this look a lot better, right? We had some support for a bit of the island, but of course now we've changed the position a little bit and it looks very strange. So we need to have a sort of a natural curve away from the islands. And this could of course be achieved something like this, right? We have just a small slope of blocks. Right? Oh, we're actually starting one too low. We need one higher. So there we go. We add one extra. And as you can see, that looks a lot better. And especially once we start adding a bunch of detail blocks, this will look really, really good. And of course, at some point, I'll add the water in there. It's much easier to work without the water when you're doing this kind of stuff. So first, we make sure that the shape of it all looks good, and then we add the water. If you, however, have never used Axiom before and have no idea what it is and you would like to know more, then I suggest you look at some tutorials, because this is not going to be a video where I'm going to be explaining a lot of Axiom. However, you also won't need to know how Axiom works in order to understand the rest of this video, so don't worry too much about it if you don't know exactly what it is. However, if you are curious and want to know more, I definitely suggest looking into it, because it is a very nice tool that allows you to do a lot of terraforming very efficiently and very quickly. And especially trying out a bunch of ideas and just painting with brushes sort of thing. It is a very fun tool to work with. But it comes with a lot of buttons and a lot of options, so it is not easy. And here is a small peek at some of the progress we've done on this first island. As you can see, we have been making the sides a little bit more thick. And sometimes we trim it down a little bit to keep it dynamic. Just as with cliffs, sometimes you want the slope to be gradual, and other times you want the slope to be a bit steeper and harsher. And using both is probably a good idea, because it creates a little bit of variance in the build. So here we have the first bit. We of course have to also make the same kinds of slopes on the outside. So I'll go ahead and just make these slopes right now real quickly, and I'll show you the result in just a second. Of the rules that I often look at as something that is very, very ugly in terraforming is when this kind of unnatural straight line appears in the terrain. So what I try to do is usually one of them goes backwards and one of them goes forwards. And then you get more of a slope. If you do it the other way around, you'll see that it is a bit sharper. So you can play a bit with how fast something goes down in level. And this way it looks much better. And then of course here we have a bit of an unnatural line. And so you keep playing with those, push them back and forward a little bit. Because if there is one over here and one over there that has the same spot, you don't really notice it as much. But when they're directly above one another, it becomes this very noticeable thing that looks very strange. In a corner, it's not that much of a big deal, because then it is much more natural. And there we go. There is the shape of the entire lake. And I think it's come along quite nicely. Of course, it is now fully without any detail, but yeah, I went through it and added all the little details in all the corners. And you must be thinking, did you do all of that by hand? And yes, I very much did. I go around removing the blocks and replacing them one by one. Because I think while a tool like Axiom is very good at the big blocky stuff and getting a lot of stuff done and a lot of shape really quickly, the finer details you can better do by hand to get the exact shape that you're looking for. Now I think it's time we look at this place with water in it, don't you think? There we go, now it looks like an actual lake. Of course, there is no vegetation, there is no trees, there is no detail, nothing. But right now we are mainly looking at shape. And this is a beautiful lake. And just imagine that there's gonna be a walkway here to get from one island to the next. And then over here, the same thing again, and with some nice trees in the middle, just like these over here. For just the sake of it, let's go ahead and throw a tree in there. And now for this, I use Litematica, which is a very nice tool to get a schematic of your builds. And especially in Creative, you can really easily create this. Now, we don't make them the same height. What I do with these trees usually, and I don't have the same rotation either. Except we don't do the same height. There we go. And then, of course, with this, we're gonna change it a little bit, maybe add one of those, and maybe we change this to be a bit lower. We can sometimes add or remove a few branches if we like. There we go, we have a few spruce trees in the world as well, right? Just imagine that. Well, you don't have to imagine, it's right there. And we could even throw in a few path blocks to make it more alive in a way. But yeah, there we go, we have a little bit of this already in the river. And of course there's gonna be a bunch of lily pads here, and we could add a bunch more details later on with like maybe some reeds on the side of the lake, because right now the side of the lake feels very dead and empty, right? But you can imagine that with some grass on the bottom of the lake and some reeds on the side, maybe this will look perfectly nice. Now, talking about the bottom of the lake, we are going to go ahead and do some of that right now to add some more detail to this. We have the brown wool, the packed mud, the mud brick slab, and then of course what I also use is these spruce slabs. And in the river, as you can see, it's not a very deep river, right? The lake is going to be a lot deeper, so I think the river will be a lot more steep. Closer to this for a few more layers, and then the bottommost layer is going to be the wood and the brown wool. So first we're going to do this. A quick in-between shot showing the progress. As you can see, the brown is definitely changing the color overall, and I'm really liking that, especially the transition later on into the spruce and then the brown wool. And you might be wondering, why are we using brown wool? Because you could also be using the dirt. But I honestly liked the brown wool a little bit better than the dirt, especially because brown wool is much softer of a texture. As you can see, dirt is a lot more noisy, and so I prefer the brown wool as sort of the bottom texture. And there we go, a little bit of detail into the bottom of the lake, and this already adds back a lot of that green. The remaining details, however, like the reeds on the side and the lily pads, I'll add those at the very end, probably even not in creative. I'll leave some of these details for me to add in survival. But now we have a pretty good feel of the lake, I think it is time that we work on the surrounding mountains. Now, something that I wanted to highlight when looking at this is that if we're looking at the Stardew Valley layout and we see a lot of these cliffs, for example, we see a cliff right here around the carpenter. And then on the left of the carpenter, we see a little staircase going up. We see another cliff edge around Linus's place over here that goes all the way around like this, and then meets up in the back here just before we cross the river. Then, of course, we cross the river, we have the entrance to the mines, and then it curves slightly forward a little bit to then have a big indentation again to make room for the Adventurers Guild. And then after that it comes back around and it curves all the way around here to then open up to a big ravine. So down here is where the big ravine will be, and roughly around here as well we have a bridge to cross the ravine in order to enter the quarry. And then of course here there should be an extra bit that goes up. Now I think as the first order of business is to clean up these cliffs a little bit, and I feel like we should get in a line of stone to make them actually sharp cliffs, just like we used to do over here and all of the other cliffs before. I think I'm gonna cut this off here somewhere and make this roughly where the slope ends. And I should also fill up the empty space around the north and the west side where the cliffs will go. A pretty nice place for Linus's tent. I slightly adjusted the curve here for the path upwards. I also adjusted this one to look a bit more natural, and I updated this entire cliff to be a bit more natural with the grass and the moss blocks. Of course, we're gonna have to do the same treatment for all of this and actually turn this more into a mountain. Now, I was talking to you while making this mountain on the right, but however the file got a little corrupted. So the process of making the beginning of this, I am now going to explain to you while I do the other mountain on the left side. The reason I have this height and I have this tree here with the light Metica is that I wanted to have trees around the base of the mountain, but still feel like the mountain is towering above it. And I want this to be a snowy peak. So this needed a lot more height. And this left one as well, this also needs a lot more height, and I probably want to increase the height of this whole ridge. Then another thing that I mentioned is that I want to make this a little bit smaller. And of course, some of you have been yelling at me in the comments already probably, that this lake here has a little river coming from the right here. And that's of course linked up to a mountain with all of the water coming from it. So there might be some waterfalls in this one, so that the water is coming from the source. As I'm editing this video, I realize that I have shown you the image of the lake However, in that image, it doesn't show this river to the right of the Adventurers Guild. I am pretty sure this isn't even in the base game, maybe it is, and I am now confused, but I have been looking at this image instead when I'm referring to this river coming from the right in the waterfalls. So yeah, we're going to be building that instead. So let me explain to you how I made this mountain here on the right. It's a combination of placing a bunch of rocks to get the height that you want. This should be good for this one. We don't want it to be that high. And then we connect it to the side a bit. This one is going to be a very steep mountain on the front. And it's going to be a lot more smooth on the side, probably. Something like this, maybe? And then on this side, it might also be a little bit more smooth. Then, to not make it look like a bunch of orbs stacked together, I am going to smooth it. Now, the smoothing tool isn't the end-all be-all, and there's many steps into making these mountains. As you can see right now, it smoothed it out to be this very straight line, and it looks absolutely horrible. I hate it. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to play around with the elevation a little bit. Then, of course, we look at it from a bit of a distance to see if we like the shape, if we like the size. I do like this going over here and this going over there. I like that vibe. And this is, of course, where we want the Adventurers Guild to be. So this could even be maybe a little bit higher as well, right? Yeah, something like that, maybe. And then, of course, if you look at it from down here somewhere, we should be able to see those trees. And I think that shape is a lot better than what I had earlier. The stuff that, of course, you didn't really see. But yeah, this way it towers above all of them. And we should be able to see the snowy peaks coming out over there. Yeah, so I like the general shape now of these. This one I like a lot more than this. Something that I don't like about this is how it barely has any steep drop-offs. It is all just very much like one block at a time. So I want to push that forward a little bit. We're going to be using the melt tool for this. There we go. That's already starting to be a little bit more what I want. This still looks a little strange though. Maybe I just get rid of a lot of this, right? Yeah, I think I like it not having this extend all the way forward. And this way we can also have just some waterfall in front of it. Now, I won't really be focusing too much on this side. I know eventually this will be something that I want to focus on. But right now, that's not super important. I'm going to add a small rock down here, though. Because that looked a little bit too square and too straight. Now, of course, the smooth... I don't like it too much. I'm gonna have to go over this by hand and fix some things, but I only want to do that when I feel like the general shape is good. I just gave this little rock a bit of detail, so now we have a small slope on this side and some cliff faces on the other side. We also added a few peaks to make it a bit more rocky on the side. So yeah, there we go, there's that. And now I'm gonna try and come up with the detail for this entire mountain. Now, I think the first order of business is to establish a cliff face line that goes around here and then goes around here, because I want those to be a bit more of a harsh cutoff. They're very gradual right now, and I want them to be very sharp, or at least a lot more sharp like these are. Now, I've been hand changing some of these cliffs to be a bit more rounded and a bit more steep at the bottom. So I've been flattening out this area, and then of course over here we want to have a sharp turn to be cliffs and the start of the mountain sort of thing. And this over here has suddenly a big gap, so I'm gonna make that a little bit smaller, so it's a bit more even. Maybe that's a little bit better. They are a bit equal, but is that too big of a deal? Maybe if that's more like that? Yeah, that works a little better, I think. Perfect. Yeah, and that's kind of how I go about changing some of the things that I don't like some really straight lines that I might change. And so I go around hand editing some of these small things. Like these are some very diagonal lines. We want those to be a bit more curved so we have an actual cliff going on. So what you do is you just add a bunch of blocks at the top. You go about, add a bunch of blocks. just so that the top of it will end up being a bit more rounded. Now let's take a look at the small change that we've made. You see, we already cut away all of the diagonal lines here, and now it does feel a little bit more rounded. Of course, here we still have a bit of a diagonal going, so we can go ahead and change that. And here the same. And of course, this needs to be cut down a little bit, so we have more of a rounded cliff. And so that's kind of the way that I go about making these cliffs. And this, of course, will be where we got the mine entrance, so this will be supported with some beams later on. And this might actually be cut out a little bit more. Maybe this is a part where it's a little bit thinner, and maybe it actually cuts all the way down. Like maybe there's a bit of an indentation here. Like what you usually want to avoid is too much repetition, too much of the exact same thing. Like these straight lines here, right? We want to break that up by doing something like this. We cut out a few of those, maybe one block there. Now we've cut away some of those more straight lines already, and it feels a bit more natural. Cut away this straight corner. We cut away some of this because it's still very steep. Maybe we make some of this. And there we go, that's the diagonal that we're looking for. Sure, it does feel a bit more rounded, and we can fix that. If we, for example, wanted it to be a bit steeper around here, or a bit more flat, we could just raise some of this. Say we want it to be more same level, right? And go ahead and raise some of this. Then we roughly stop at this level here somewhere. And now we've raised it a bit, but now this feels a bit too flat, so maybe we can remove some of that, so we have a bit of a difference in level. Now we've got a bit of a plateau. Now, as for the details, since I think I like the shape, and I'm gonna probably do a little bit of editing on the other one still later on, and maybe on the side here where I still want to edit it a little bit. So I'm definitely not gonna be 100% done, but what I want to do right now is get a bunch of detail in, right? So on this height, we still have a bunch of grass, and I'm gonna continue that down here, down this slope. As we get higher on the mountain though, I want to start introducing snow, maybe around this height right here. Let's go ahead and put a grass block there. This is where I want snow to start appearing. And then of course we can add a bit more detail with the individual snow layers. Now for the grass, I think this is where I would like grass to still show up, because I feel like this is sort of flat still, right? We want those trees to show up here, so I think this is a perfect spot to have a bunch of those trees show up. Now when it comes to putting some grass on little bits, I could, for example, say that this area right here is a bit more green, right? Maybe that is a bit of a grassy ridge on the side of the mountain. I could make that pop out a little bit. And then you have a bit of color all spread over the mountain. And I think that works quite nicely. Maybe over this side as well, we have a bit more grass showing up. And maybe then on top of this, this currently feels not steep enough, so I might even change that as well, so that we have a bit more of a cliff face on this side, like we're used to how I did it before. Because all of these very straight lines, I don't like them too much, so what I could do is make a bit more detail, like over here, for example. Maybe this comes out a bit more, like this, just like we always do these cliffs, and then it goes all the way up. Maybe this pulls out quite a bit further. Of course, we're editing this whole cliff quite a bit with this kind of thing. I feel like this will just make it a lot more interesting if we have little bits that stick out here or there, or just where the shape of the entire thing changes, instead of a bunch of straight lines. And there you go. That's sort of the idea, right? It's not fully done yet, but I think you get the idea. So I think what I'm going to do is, instead of showing you every tiny bit of progress, I'm going to just do a lot of detailing with the colors, like I said, the snow, the grass, change a bit of the shape, and then we're going to meet back here and I'll show you the result. And there we go, there is a little draft. I think this is cool. I try to keep it so that it's not fully white and that there is still a bit of rock shining through. And, you know, I think I'm quite happy with how it looks. We have quite a bit of snow at the top, and then it's a little bit less at the bottom. I tried to use a lot of these snow layers on top of some diorite to still keep it white, but also mixed with some rocks. And then, of course, we use some andesite that is a slightly lighter stone with also a little bit more texture than stone to sort of blend it back into the stone. And now I think the only thing that we're still missing is some darker rocks, somewhere here in the middle maybe. And we probably play around with some of these grass patches. And eventually, of course, we're going to place some trees on here. And of course, we're going to have to do this bad boy. A little bit more progress. I planted a bunch of extra trees all over the place. And I added a bit more detail with the grass and a little bit of deep slate. And I think just having a few spots that are darker really helps give some shadow to the mountain. I also tried darkening this spot just a little bit with some deep slate and tuff, and it stands out just a little bit more. I'm not entirely sure if I like it yet, but we're getting there, I think. I think it's really time that I do this one over here. And then this is, of course, the spot where we want the Adventurers Guild. And then over here, I think on the right side of this tree, I want that little stream that eventually meets up with the lake. And then, of course, on the right side of that will be a couple more trees. And then I think we're good. There we have a beginning for the stream. And I think this would be a perfect spot where we transition into the little waterfall. So this would be then where it meets the cliff. And the waterfall comes up from there. Then maybe it's a little bit more flat again. Maybe we cut off a bunch of this. And maybe then it comes out of the mountain somewhere in this corner. I don't know. No idea how it's gonna look just yet. But that could be where it's coming from. Let's see what it looks like with some water. There we go. That's sort of an idea, isn't it? Well, that's definitely not the idea. Maybe instead of that. It's always interesting to try and create the shape of the waterfall that you want. I think that's a little better maybe. There we go. We have a little bridge over this stream. It's coming out of the mountain right there. And it looks quite peaceful. Of course, there's still a couple of trees that are going to go on this side, and eventually we're going to have like a lot of grass and flowers, and oh, it's going to look all so cozy. Alright, there we have it. I added a bunch of trees, and as you can see, added a bit of detail to the mountain. I also worked on the side a bit, gave it a bit more shape, and I think it's slowly getting there. I'm not sure how much I will do more on this right side. I think I'll tackle most of the details when we are getting to the quarry. Similar to on the left here, I think I will tackle that in the actual video once we're building that. Because these cliffs aren't any different from my regular cliffs, so I don't want to go ahead and add too much detail, just like these over here. I'll figure that out. Now the only thing missing is a couple of trees still, because there's a couple of cherry trees that should be all over this place, and then this middle bit should have a couple of trees. Because this of course is something that isn't really on the map, but there should definitely be some trees here maybe, and maybe a few more trees along this path. I'll go ahead and add a couple of trees. I'll be back in 1 second. I love that bit of pink pop-up here. It's like a nice color in between all of the green tints. It looks really nice. One small detail that I was about to forget was that there is not a waterfall yet connecting this bit of water to the mountain. So let's go ahead and add that quickly. And there we go. I think with that, I have done all that I wanted to do. We have the mountains, we have the lake, we've got a bunch of trees around. And now these are the first mountains that I have ever built, especially snowy mountains. And so I hope that you learned something from me explaining to you the process that I went through. There are aspects of this mountain that I am not completely happy with, and then in future iterations I might try some different approaches. But I think the result looks really, really nice, and I'm very, very happy with it. Now, this video is a lot longer than the previous ones, of course, so I hope that you stuck around till the very end. If you did, please let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next episode, where I'm going to be delving into the carpenter, and I'll be explaining to you how I design the building from the exterior point of view and also the interior point of view. How do I translate it from the image that we see in Stardew Valley to the in-game blocks with the Minecraft colors and all of the little details that go into it. So I hope that also sounds exciting to you, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.